Hello, and welcome. Hello in person, Rosemary.
I know, my God, look at us, here we are.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 7 of Barclay Damon's Labor and Employment Podcast. As you know, my name is Lee Jacobs. I'm joined here in person with my colleague,
Rosemary Enright. I feel like we're Kelly and Mark.
A little bit.
A little bit. We're on our little stools in the studio.
And where are we, Rosemary?
We are in Studio B, also known as Buffalo, New York.
I made the trip up here to visit a client yesterday, and I felt that Rosemary and I felt this was an apt time to sit together and to discuss with all of you employee offboarding, especially since we just came from a 3-part episode on employee onboarding. So here we think, let's continue the conversation. Employee offboarding. So welcome to Parting Ways, Mastering the Art of Employee Offboarding. And this is probably going to be another multi-parter, so this is for sure part 1. So as we always do, I think we need to start with a fun fact. And we didn't talk about them beforehand, so I've got nothing in the bank here. So I'm going to toss it to you first, Rosemary.
All right.
What's your fun fact for the day?
So my fun fact for the day is that last weekend I did my first adult Easter egg hunt.
You told me about this last night. This is a good one. This is a good one for those that don't know they exist.
Yes, that's right. It was a lot of fun. Lee and I had dinner last night, so together. So the Saturday before Easter Sunday, there is a winery here in Chautauqua County, 21 Bricks. Shout out to 21 Bricks, and they do an adult Easter egg hunt, and I loved. Ask the question you asked me at dinner.
Was it was it an adult Easter egg hunt? Like, was it Easter eggs for adults, or was it an adult Easter egg hunt? Which one was it?
And the response is, it is an Easter egg hunt for adults. So if you celebrate Easter and you go out and put eggs in the yard and everything, that's what they did for us. But it was 10,000 eggs. And they were hidden over 8 acres. Lee, I told Lee the story. Lee, how long did the hunt take?
3 minutes, 4 minutes?
Yes, 4 minutes. So, and he asked me, how many people were at this hunt? There were 300 of us. So 300 adults in 4 minutes over 8 acres found 10,000 eggs.
What were inside the eggs?
So inside the eggs, candy, sadly, I only got candy, but they have some great prizes. So weekends at bed and breakfast, and cases of wine, bottles of wine, all of that. So I mean, some great gifts. But it's done in 4 minutes. And I was joking with my father. I said, if you need motivation to get yourself back in shape, go to one of those Easter egg hunts. I mean, I ran across the lawn, picked up, as many eggs as I could out of the trees and the bushes, and went to run, and it was already done. I'm like, oh my gosh! But it was a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to doing it next year. So that's my fun fact.
So my fun fact was something that after I got back to the hotel last night, I opened up my text messages, and I had 313 messages in a group chat of friends that I put my phone on silent during dinner last night. 313 messages. So we've known each other for 10, 15 years or so, and we go every year to Orlando to Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studios, and they just released the schedule, and we booked our trip. So we are now a group of 40-something-year-olds are going to be making our trip down on the weekend of September 20th, if anyone wants to join us, to Orlando, Florida, to scream our heads off in haunted houses. It's a lot of fun. I have to really, I'd say if someone who wants to yell and not care and be loud, it's a place to do it. And you can have a lot of fun and a great time doing it.
Wow. So you think about it, Lee, the two things we just talked about kind of go together. It's adults doing things that you wouldn't normally expect adults to do.
Right.
Seriously.
An adult haunted house or an adult haunted house?
That's right. Exactly. How fun. All right. Well, that's great.
So I think I should join you next year's Easter egg hunt, and you should join me the next year's perhaps haunted house hunts.
All right, that sounds like a date. All right, so we get into it here.
Yep, offboarding. So there's so many of my clients don't consider offboarding. And what I mean by offboarding is you've made the decision to terminate an employee and let them go, or an employee has determined that they want to leave voluntarily from the position. And it's what do we do from that point? Once the business makes the decision to involuntarily let someone go, or they get word that someone is voluntarily leaving, what should a business do from that moment on? So many businesses don't do anything. And because of that, they're losing out. So my recommendation is you need to consider it as part of the life cycle. Just as onboarding is part of the employee life cycle, so is offboarding. Because if you don't, you run into some risks. And the first risk that I want to bring up is data and integrity and things to that nature. I had a client report to me this week that an employee that they let go had access to his email, and he believed that she still had access to his email even though she had been let go weeks prior. What?
How does this happen?
Yeah. So like it needs to be an orchestrated moment. And I've got some statistics from a Zippa HR 2024, ZIPPA study that says 71% of organizations have no formal offboarding process, and 76% of IT leaders agree that a lack of an offboarding process poses a significant security threat to a business. Rosemary, have you run into any challenges like this? We're just thinking from like pure security basis, like, am I making sure that my business is protected as my employee is leaving and walking away from the business?
Yeah, well, and I just want to step back for a second. Just as we went through that whole discussion, I think we had 3 episodes on the onboarding, and we said how important it is to have that, the process, and it's for everybody. And this is the same thing. That's why we're calling it the art of offboarding. Everybody just thinks, oh, somebody's gone, we've got their laptop, that's the end of it. But there's so much more to it. And you make that point that you're talking about with clients who don't think about shutting off someone's access. Mm-hmm. On a related note, what we've run into is that employees that are gone, but now they need information like on their payroll, right? So they're doing taxes, or for whatever reason, they need that information, and the client inadvertently has shut off their ADP.
Yep.
All right. And so now, so in the one case, you do want to shut everything down. All right. Because we don't want somebody still accessing, our systems. But on the other hand, you've got some systems that they still have to have access to, or I shouldn't say a system, but your ADP, they should always have access to that for 6 years, 7 years.
For tax purposes and payroll purposes.
Yeah, exactly. It's their payroll records.
And you as the employer failure to provide them, unfortunately, the buck stops with you. And the employer can get into trouble for that.
Yeah.
And so the security, right, and the data, in the electronic world, I think it's becoming, and the remote world, it's becoming a bit more challenging. Back in the day, when I first entered the workforce, this is, years before, before college and such, you remember the ideas, someone's getting fired or terminated, they pack up their stuff and they walk out of the office, and it's an easy thing. Security's waiting for them. There's a box. Yeah. Now, what do? You've got email accounts. You're saying ADP accounts. They have access to the banking information. Yeah. And they might have
a cell phone. They've got a cell phone that the company has given to them.
And what if it's a cell phone that it's their personal cell phone that the company is paying for, right. They've ported their number into your business? It's so much more complicated. Yeah. And I think where the point is as we said with onboarding, there was an art, there was a list that it should be done the same way every time. For offboarding, it's the same thing. Yeah. And so that's what we're going to talk about here today. So there's 2 tracks to think about this, and we're going to walk down just one, and then we're going to highlight differences at the end. Yeah. So there's either a voluntary termination, an employee says, I quit. Thank you. It's been great. I quit. An involuntary termination.
It's not you, it's me.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And then an involuntary termination. Yeah. This is where you as the employer, it is you, it's not us. That's right. Let them go. We're going to walk down the involuntary path, where the business has identified that we have an employee that we're going to let go, and we're going to walk through the different steps. And then when we get through the end of it, we're going to circle back around and say, okay, so this would have been different in this scenario, or that would have been different in that scenario. We're going to focus this on the notion of one single employee. I was throwing some names around earlier, and all my names weren't necessarily appropriate. So, Rosemary, what's the name of this employee that is our hypothetical employee that we're determining to let go?
Why don't we just make it Rosemary?
Okay.
We'll make it Rosemary.
So Rosemary is being let go. And so now I am a manager, HR, whatever you want to call it. I'm the decision maker. And I've received word from Rosemary's boss that Rosemary has now been late 5 times in violation of company policy, and therefore she's eligible for termination, and we want to terminate her. What do we do? So that's our premise. That's where we're going to start from. Ready to go?
Ready to go.
So the first step that I would do is, before we even go any further, I'm going to look at Rosemary's personnel file. I'm going to make sure that we have everything that we talked about in the onboarding episodes there. That LS-54 if she's an hourly employee, the LS-59 if she's an exempt employee, or whatever it may be. I want to make sure they're there, so that way I know that I'm starting on a good foot moving forward, right? That I don't have any exposure. Then the next thing I'm going to look to is to see if I paid Rosemary everything. Rosemary, I'm going to talk about the notions first of, like, did I pay enough hours? Did I pay proper minimum wage, overtime, salary? Like, I'm going to balance the books. Did I pay enough? But what about overtime? What about vacation? What about sick time? What about those things? I'm sitting here. Yeah. I've now made the decision that, I'm going to let this employee go. My paperwork is in order. I've checked ADP, my payroll company. They should have been paid X. I see Y deposits. And now I see they've got sick time. They've got vacation time. What do I do? How do I address this topic?
All right. Great question. But I'm going to just step back for 1 second. Sure. The other thing that Lee and I talked about is when they come in and say, we want to let Rosemary go, I want to know, is Rosemary at will? Or does she have an employment agreement?
Absolutely.
All right. And so for purposes of this discussion, I'm at will. Right?
Got it.
Yep. So, and as Lee said, we've got 2 tracks going on. So, and we'll talk about if we have someone who actually has an employment agreement. Now, now to throw a wrench in it, you could be at will and have an employment agreement. So we could even talk about that. But the bottom line is the individual at will, or do they have an employment agreement that has a set term? All right. And if there is an agreement, you're going to go through it and look, because as I said, you could have someone who is at will. I've drafted many contracts, employment agreements, because they want to include in their restrictive covenants and those types of things. But anyway, so to Lee's question, so we look, and I've got Rosemary, our fictitious employee, has got sick time and she's got vacation time. What do we do with that? All right. So quick refresher. I think we've talked about this on other podcasts, but remember, now we're going to talk about New York right now. Yes, we have offices in Massachusetts and Connecticut and DC, but right now Lee and I are focused on New York. So in New York, with the payout of paid time off or vacation, so let's think about sick as separate, but your PTO and your vacation pay, if you're doing some, do call it one or the other. First thing you're going to do is you're going to look at what your policy says, because New York State says, all right, if you're silent, all right, if you don't have a policy that has in it, includes with it, what we refer to as forfeiture language. So the conditions under which you would forfeit the payout of any accrued but unused vacation. So if we have
known as like use it or lose it?
Not really.
But you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do know what you're talking about. Yeah. So no, I'd say use it or lose it is at the end of the year. We don't have carryover. We don't carry it over. If you don't use it in the year in which you have earned it, you're going to lose it. Okay. But that's a great question. Yeah, exactly. So no, but in New York, but I mean, New York, again, it's the policy, your policy, but in particular at the time of separation, what New York says is the policy dictates. If there is no policy that talks about the payout of vacation or PTO, they get the vacation and the PTO. right? So you've got to go and look, what is our policy? So do we have a policy, and does it say at the time of termination of employment, you get payout? And there may be conditions in there, as I said, forfeiture. So what a lot of employers will do is they'll say, if we're letting somebody go for cause, all right.
Here, this scenario, fictitious Rosemary is late.
Because I'm late.
In violation of the policy.
Exactly. And so I'm being terminated for cause. And let's say our policy says employees who are terminated for cause will not be paid out. They're any accrued but unused PTO. That's forfeiture language. So I don't get it. So we can look and say, oh, all right, we're letting her go for cause. Our policy clearly states that that's the case. She doesn't get payout. If we have a policy that just talks about PTO and says nothing about what happens at time of separation, then Rosemary gets the payout. You know, so you've got to pay attention to your policy. And so, as I said, so I've got a lot of clients who will, in their policy, say, if you're terminated for cause, no payout. Resignation, position elimination, layoffs, you get payout. If you give us 2 weeks notice and you work the notice period, you get your payout. So all the, it just depends on what the policy says. But again, if it's silent, you get nothing.
So that the employee gets nothing if it's silent.
No, if they get everything.
Correct.
They get everything. Yes.
So the moral is say something.
Yes.
Say make sure
exactly.
literally say something.
Yeah.
And this isn't separate from sick time. We're going to talk about sick time in a moment.
Yeah. And
I know so many places have blended sick time policies with vacation, and that causes some problems here because the goal here is right. So now we know we're letting Rosemary go. So now fast forward, a week when we're actually pulling the trigger. I'm sitting across from Rosemary and I can say, Rosemary, you're getting your last check on Friday. It's going to have all of your pay. And we also note you've got 5 days of vacation in the bank and you signed the handbook that has the policy that says you get nothing because you've been terminated. Thank you.
That's right.
Or Rosemary, thank you.
Yep.
Rosemary, you've got 5 days in the bank. It will be included on your last paycheck.
Right.
Precisely. So you have a controlled narrative of when you're having this last conversation with the employee.
That's right. And you're not having that battle because it often happens. Well, wait a second. I've got all this vacation.
Exactly.
Why am I not getting it?
And so what about sick time?
Yeah.
So how do we crack the sick time nut here now? So this is either New York City employees where you have the New York City safe and sick leave and New York State safe and sick leave now.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and Lee, as we all know, is our New York City expert. So if New York State has if New York City has a different nuance, that was the word. Yeah, you'll chime in. Yeah, but I think hopefully most of you know the New York sick paid, sick and safe. You're not entitled to that at time of separation, regardless of the reason. And generally, we would advise you to state that in the policy so there's not a question. So as Lee sat here and he said, you can hand them, here's the handbook, here's your acknowledgement, clearly states, and so forth. It's nice to have that, but it isn't required because the New York City, the law is crystal clear. That sick leave, that's earned and not used, that is not paid out at time of separation. Now, I will say some employers do that. And that's fine if you do. But if you're going to do that, again, you got to say it.
Same thing. Same thing with the city. Say it. You got to be explicit in your language. And where people walk into problems is that you have a blended pool of sick leave and vacation leave. And they roll over year to year, right? You don't have it, use it or lose it. And you have someone that you're at an exit interview sitting in a bank of hundreds of hours of combined sick and safe leave. And your handbook is silent. And you have an acrimonious exit, you're looking at a potentially large payout to someone in an exit interview on their way out the door. So, this is even before you've sat across, asked that, said, hi, Rosemary, do you know why we're talking to you today?
That's right.
Before we've even done any of that.
Yeah.
And so, and then the other thing that I would do here, and I get this call all the time, Rosemary, I'm curious if you get this too. I get the call. So Rosemary's been late. I can fire her, right? And then my answer is, why are you really calling? The answer is yes.
Yeah.
So what I would say here is you're in the position here now. You now are being told to terminate someone, or you're making the determination of whether to terminate someone. Ask some questions. What's really going on? Is there any exposure that we have to be worried about? How does this pop up in your practice, Rosemary?
Oh, every single day.
Tell me.
Literally,
Tell me.
every single day.
Rather tell us.
Yes, literally. I mean, I get at least one of these calls a day. And at this point, a lot of my clients who I've worked with for years and years, they know the questions I'm going to ask. They say, all right, so I can tell you this is this person and they happen to be, and we'll go down a kind of a checklist of different characteristics. But, and so they paint the picture for me. And then they tell me, this is how long the person has worked for me. They are at will. So again, checking all kind of these mental boxes. And then I do exactly what Lee said, which is, all right, so tell me what's going on. So you're telling me it's an attendance issue. We have a policy. And they say, well, yeah, and you know what it is? They're on FMLA. Mm-hmm. Ding, 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 ding,
exactly.
Ding. You know, and they're calling off and go ahead.
Or they filed the complaint last week.
That's right, exactly. They came in and filed a complaint about so and so saying this or doing that. That's exactly right. Or they just got back from leave.
Yep.
Just got back from leave. They were out and now they're doing whatever they're doing, and now Rosemary is strolling them when she wants to. She's still on her schedule when she was at home. Right?
So it's because what we're trying to avoid unintended consequences, essentially. And you do all of this by doing the plan before, so this is step 0, right? In my mind, step 0 before you're even starting the offboarding is you're getting all of your ducks in the row. You're making sure we've paid the right amount, what needs to still be paid, and what's really going on. Yeah. What's really the real reason, because if something's been elevated to you in an HR capacity, or you as an employer are trying to figure out, what am I doing with this particular employee? You have to figure out, okay, can this employee turn this around on me and say, no, I wasn't fired because I was late. I was fired because of this. And we want to try to anticipate that if we can. And it will probably be the subject of a whole nother episode. So stay tuned. Yeah. But perhaps maybe do we want to offer this particular employee a severance agreement, something where we're getting a release in exchange for some potential exposure that we may have. Stay tuned. We'll talk about that.
That's right. Exactly. Well, and with this, when we're talking about what's the real reason, what's going on, and we talk through, then, so let's say, no, this person hasn't filed a complaint and they didn't just come back from leave, or they didn't just file a workers' comp claim or something.
Exactly.
Like, all of these things. Let's say it's, no, Rosemary is just late. She's always at home primping. She gets late. She comes to work late because she's primping coming in. But seriously, but then what I'd ask is, all right, well, tell me about your attendance policy, because that's what I want to know also. And do you have documentation that shows, that she was late? And by the way, depending on the lateness, what do we do with others? So Rosemary, she's come in late, but did you happen to peek at Lee's time records? And, is he punching in 2 or 3 minutes late every day? Yeah. And we just didn't happen to catch it. And
then what Rosemary will turn around and do is say, I was sexually discriminated against. They didn't fire Lee because he was a man. Yeah. They fired me because I'm a woman.
Right. Exactly.
And if you don't have the documents, right, where laid up, ready to go, you have now exposed yourself. So, for example, right, you've now done your work. The manager has said, we need to terminate Rosemary. I'm going through my checklist. Rosemary's last point here is, do I have the goods? Yeah. Do I have the data? Do I have the backup? Yeah. I can then say, I'm in this position of HR. I'm the owner of my business. I can go back to my manager and say, I need the write-ups. Yeah. I need the write-ups. Okay. Then get Rosemary late again, right? Get it actually written up, delay it. Wait another shift or two, and then do it the right way so you're fully protected and secured. Yeah, and are we holding her to the same standard? And that's the other question too. If you do have different standards, that's a different issue that has to be corrected. Yes, exactly. That must be corrected because you have to treat your best employee the same on their worst day than when you treat your worst employee on their best day. I love that. You have to treat them the same. I love that quote. You have to treat your best employee the same on their worst day as you would treat your worst employee on their best day. Yeah.
And that's hard.
It is.
It's very hard.
Because you have that employee who's always early.
Yes.
Always early, and they're late. And then you have that bad employee who you're looking for that excuse for them to be late.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
And now they show it. So you got to treat them, and it's difficult. It's so hard sometimes, and we get it. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
Please reach out. Please reach out and help. Yeah. Okay. Right. So now, I think this is probably a good breaking point. Or do we want to jump into we're ready to sit down with Rosemary and have the exit interview?
What do you think?
I think let's walk through the exit interview process.
Okay. Yeah. And then after that,
we'll take a break.
Yeah.
Okay. So just like with the onboarding process, you want to have a checklist in my mind. Every offboarding happens the same way. So an involuntary offboarding, we know we're letting Rosemary go. Hopefully she'll sit down and she'll talk with us in an exit interview. She'll sit down and she'll answer some questions. But before we actually sit down in the exit interview, we want to talk with her IT people, whomever else it needs to be, to make sure that her account is ready to be turned off at a certain point, whether security needs to be alerted to escort Rosemary out of the building after she's done with the exit interview. But we need to get all of that down. And now Rosemary either gets the phone call, the email, the walkover, and say, Rosemary, come into our office. We need to talk. And then when you sit down there, we want to ask questions, and we want to ask questions that I'll ask about to the extent that Rosemary is willing to share with us, right? An involuntary exit, they're probably not, but a voluntary one, they would want to talk and get information points. We want to know about job satisfaction, work culture, environment. How was management? How was leadership? Was there growth and development opportunities? What was the real reasons for departure? I've got, because most employees think that they've got some insights that can make the business really change and make it better. And I've got one anecdote, and I'll turn it over to you, Rosemary. I had a chef who went through 13 dishwashers in 11 months. And he said to me, Lee, I just don't know why I'm going through 11 dishwashers. They just keep on quitting. And I said to the chef, well, did you ask the dishwashers as to why they're quitting? And he said, no. And he asked this last dishwasher on the way out, and the dishwasher said in so many words, I can't work here anymore because Y is a blank. And he found out that this person was causing problems for other people. He dealt with the person who was a blank, a curse word, and then the attrition problems went away. The dishwashers didn't leave because he just didn't ask that question on an employee on the way out the door. What are your thoughts, Rosemary?
Yeah, well, here, even at the firm, we do exit interviews, and you learn great things. You learn, and it isn't necessarily things that aren't going well. It's also things that are going well, right? And so that's, I think, always interesting to hear too, because you can build on that, right? And it shows you, this is working. And so we want to continue doing that. So it's the good and maybe the not so good. Now, the thing that I always find interestingly in the exit interviews, even if it's someone, so let's put the involuntary aside, because if somebody's being let go and it wasn't their choice, often it's not going to be positive, and they're going to say, I'm not going to give you the time of day. All right, but you can be talking to someone and they're leaving under good terms. But during that conversation, they might just out of the blue, Lee, bring up, well, what I've noticed is so-and-so is doing this or doing that. Or, I love working here, but you know what? I'm a little uncomfortable around Lee. He said some things, or, Lee and I'll admit, we're both huggers. Yep. But let's say that somebody.
Fictitious Rosemary is not a hugger.
Fictitious Rosemary is not a hugger, and Lee hugs me.
Yep.
All right. And I'm like, you know what? Lee is, hugs, and that makes me uncomfortable, or whatever it happens to be. And a lot of clients will think, oh, okay, thanks. They write it all down and they put it in a file cabinet. Okay. What do you tell your client? I know what I tell my clients when somebody says,
you've now just created Exhibit A for when there's a lawsuit against Lee because he's a hugger.
Yes.
You were on notice, you were made aware of it, and did absolutely nothing.
That's right. So you always do the investigation. Everybody's like, well, do I really have to do that, Rosemary? They're gone now.
Yep.
All right. But as he said, first Exhibit A, because they're going to say, so when fictitious Rosemary left and she told you this, what did you do?
Nothing.
How well is that going to go
Nothing.
over?
Literally, that's the answer. It's going to be nothing.
Yes.
It's not going to go over well. And then also in the involuntary scenario, this is also gives you another opportunity where I sit down with now fictitious Rosemary. She's willing to sit down and talk with me. And she's now burning the roof down.
Yes.
Right? Your fictitious Rosemary is saying, and I was discriminated. This person touched me. I heard this quote and you didn't pay me this. And I have unexpensed reimbursements. This is now giving you, oh, okay, I maybe need to call my lawyer now, right? Yeah. This is giving you the data points. Okay, this person's not going to go quietly into the night. And so now you've got a leg up on them. Okay, maybe I didn't do all of my legwork before I walked into the exit interview to get all my ducks in a row. So now this is saying maybe I need to before a lawyer letter or the DOL shows up.
Right.
So I know how to act appropriately.
Exactly. And as we just said, you have to do the investigation. You get all your ducks in a row. And if you find out, something was maybe not handled as well as it should have been, you correct it.
Yep.
Right. So it's just like when the DOL comes knocking. All right. And so we come in and we help you start doing an analysis. We're like, you know what? We weren't paying people right for their meal periods. We fix it immediately, right? So this is the same thing. If you discover something, you fix it immediately. So if somebody comes knocking, you can show, yes, the minute we were made aware of it, we had knowledge, we did an investigation, and we corrected it.
And I think as a closing point on this, as to sorry.
I was just going to say it feeds into what we're going to do one of these on investigations.
Oh, yeah, no.
I was going
to say that too. I mean, stay tuned. We've got an investigations episode coming up. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to put up on the website probably a roadmap of the things that we're going to be talking about, because we've been getting feedback from so many of you want to hear about these topics or those topics. And the answer literally is stay tuned. They're coming. They're coming. We can't
do it fast enough.
They're in the can and they're coming. But I think here, as we'll pause and move on, close this part, imagine these two scenarios, right? You have fictitious Rosemary, right? You have one fictitious Rosemary who we don't have a process. We let Rosemary go. She's off into the wind and we have no idea what happens. Yeah. But something did happen to Rosemary, or we didn't pay her appropriately. She was, there was jokes. She was touched. Something bad happened.
Yeah.
She's gone. Versus where you have an offboarding program, we identified that when Rosemary left, we owed her X, we owed her Y, we paid her this. DOL is incoming from Wage and Hour Division. We've sat down with her, we've checked out with her. Rosemary, did you have any issues? Did you have any problems? None. We have nothing to worry about. Or on the converse, we did. We know and we're ready for it.
Yeah.
So many of these things can be prevented. And this is another chance where you can prevent it. So last thing to remember here for a voluntary departure. So after you say farewell, you thank them for their time. They've been there, an involuntary departure. You thank them for their time. You go back to your office, you type up your notes, however things went, and then you send in the mail a notice of termination, which is required by the Department of Labor, which we know so many businesses do not do.
That's right.
You send a notice of termination in the mail to the last known address, as well as giving the employee notification of how to file unemployment benefits.
And that's a new thing this year. So, and everybody should know that. They're like, oh yeah, Rosemary, I've got a sentence in my letter that says, you may be eligible for New York State unemployment benefits. That's not going to cut it anymore. All right, there's a set form, and I don't think we've got, you know what, Lee, we've got to get the, do you know the number?
Stay tuned. We will give you the number at the lead of the next episode.
There you go. So there's the hook.
Yep.
We're going to reel you in.
So stay
That's
tuned.
Right, exactly.
But so on the notice of termination letter that you send in the mail saying your last date was this day, your last paycheck will be on this day, inconsistent with our normal payroll policies, then the next paragraph should be you are also eligible for unemployment insurance. Stay tuned for the language, and we'll get that to you.
Yeah.
Okay. So as always, we are now also have up on Spotify. There's a poll, and we have some questions for you. And our questions are as follow. That we've got a two-parter. The first is: do you currently offboard your employees? The answers are yes, no, yes, or no. And if the answer was no, I will now. Let us know if this has had an effect on how you're going to your processes. And the second question is If so, and you're currently doing offboarding, do you do exit interviews? And that's a simple yes or no question as well. We look forward to hearing from you. As a reminder, we're always here. Reach out to either one of us. We're happy to hear from you, happy to help, and stay tuned.
For part 2, right?
Part 2 of Parting Ways, Mastering the Art of Employee Onboarding. Thanks so much, everyone.
Right. Bye.
The Labor and Employment Podcast is available on barclaydamon.com, YouTube, and all your favorite podcast streaming platforms. Like, follow, share, and continue to listen. Thanks.